and welcome. Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Belomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law, and well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. Today is going to fall squarely under estate planning and elder law, as we are going to come back to an oldie but a goodie. As everyone hopefully knows, we absolutely listen to the listeners and listen to what it is that you guys want us to talk about. And we have been getting a lot of questions lately about the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, and how everybody keeps saying, I don't need any of this because Medicare will take care of me. So my heart and my soul hurt, because it's what I've been kind of preaching for the past 20 years, but I totally understand it. There is not a lot of people out there talking about it, and therefore it's a topic we're going to have to revisit a few times to really clear up the confusion. So today's radio show is going to be about the Medicare versus Medicaid, what the differences are, and as it relates to Medicaid, what it is, and also how does it work, and what can you do. So a nice overview today. We should have a lot of fun. I also want to make an announcement. We're very excited to be in our new location in the Lancaster area. We are at 1755 Oregon Pike, right behind Eden Resort, right behind Sheets in that office complex. We are very excited to have a space that will be permanent, and that we will be there and have a substantial presence in the Lancaster community. We are no longer at our old office on Embassy Drive. We just kind of outgrew the space and wanted a more dedicated location, which we have now received. So we're really excited about it. So please check us out there. And also, just a little bit of a teaser for the fall. This fall, you're going to be hearing a lot about our book that I wrote, as well as Dan Hill, who's another attorney in our office that is primarily in the Lancaster office. It's called A Fork in the Road. Modern Estate Planning Takes the Other Fork. And for those of you who have been listening to the podcasts, the book basically takes a lot of the stuff that we have been talking about on our shows and puts it into a kind of a parable, a real life example of a case that occurred, and how we were able to help a family who was given maybe not so great advice previously, and then was able to help their family not only currently but also in the future, for the future generations. And unfortunately, because of the bad advice that was given, there was an impact to the family the first go round, at least to the grandparents, but we were able to solve it for the children and also for the future generations moving forward. So basically talks about the model in our practice and how we help people, and some of the things that we're doing that are a little cutting edge, but really aren't, because they're based upon very sound, common trust principles. On a recent show, we talked about how the new revenue ruling that came out this year has nothing to do with the trust that we are using, but because they use the word irrevocable, people are freaking out, wondering and worrying that the revenue ruling has something to do with our trust that we are using, and they do not. Our trusts are based upon sound common trust principles as well as tax principles, and they are pure grantor trusts, and the revenue ruling was in regards to an intentionally defective grantor trust, which is included for income tax purposes, but not estate tax purposes. And I could never understand how, if it's not included for estate tax purposes, people were able to get a step up in basis. It doesn't make sense. I've been saying that for 15 years, and there is another show that talks specifically about that as well. But I did want to bring it up on this radio show so that if you have seen that, please do not worry. It has nothing to do with the trust that we are doing. And listen to that podcast. I think you'll enjoy it, and hopefully you'll pick up quite a bit. So let's get on to the topic today. I do want to talk about Medicare versus Medicaid. So what is Medicare, right? It's basically health insurance. For people over 65, there are some other exceptions, but let's just say for people over 65, it's health insurance. And what we are taught kind of just in passing and as we grow up is that, you kind of pay into the system, and then when you turn 65, you're going to get health insurance for the rest of your life, and you'll be taken care of. And, for the most part, it works as we planned it. It works as it was intended. It works as what we think it should work. The part where I think there is a huge misconception that it does not provide for is long-term care. Now, when I say long-term care, I'm talking long-term care in a skilled nursing facility or in the home getting skilled nursing facility under the waiver program. We have done other podcasts where we talked about it. We've done shows. So please, if you're looking specifically for that, there are other shows that will talk about it. For the purpose of today, I really just want to highlight the difference between these two. And I think the way to do it is to actually use a story that we use in our workshops, right? So as I lay there in bed at night and, an individual who's over 65, they have a tough situation that they're placed in because of our system, because of the way that the Medicare and Medicaid rules work. And here's the example. If a person has a heart attack, the system works probably exactly what we want it to and how it was intended, which is the person gets rushed to the hospital, they go under major surgery, they probably spend 2 to 3 weeks in the hospital, and then eventually they'll be discharged for rehabilitation, right? So they'll go to a rehab hospital, they'll go to a nursing home that has a rehab wing or rehab, side of it, and the individual will then receive rehabilitation to the point where they get stronger and then no longer need it and can either go home, or if they can't get stronger, then they end up staying potentially in the nursing home for a long period. But here's where it's unique, right? So the person has the heart attack, goes to the nursing home, gets the rehabilitation. If that individual does not have a supplemental policy, they'll be responsible for some out-of-pocket costs, right? There's a first 20 days, and then from 20 to 80, there's a copay, and then from 80 to 100, there's another copay. But even that isn't significant or catastrophic, right? It's a copay to kind of put in some money towards that rehabilitation. If the person has a supplemental policy, they're going to pay virtually nothing for that entire stay. The hospital bill will be paid for, the rehabilitation will be paid for, and that person ends up going home, hopefully, and the system worked the way that we thought. No problem, right? We are good to go. That's what we expect. Now, let me change the facts, right? Same person goes to bed, has a massive stroke, loses the ability to use some of their extremities, and in a lot of cases, it ends up infecting their brain impairment, their brain function. They forget things. They're not able to comprehend things as easily. So now that same person goes to the hospital, has the surgery, spends a couple weeks in the hospital, gets discharged for rehabilitation. Okay, now here's where the difference really becomes exacerbated. That same person now goes to a rehab hospital or to a nursing home, a skilled nursing home that has a rehabilitation, and they'll start on Medicare paying up to 100 days, just as they did in the heart attack example, as long as the person can continue to rehabilitate. Now, this is where the distinction is, because for a person who had a massive stroke, has lost use of extremities, and possibly the ability to cognitively think the same way, oftentimes they refuse rehabilitation. Or they just can't do it, right? They're just not physically able to do it. And here's where the two diverge. Because under this example, they're either going to go from paying very little, just a copay, if they don't have a supplemental policy, or nothing, potentially if they do, to now having to pay the full skilled nursing rate privately. And in those situations, very few people are able to go home because they're not strong enough. They don't have the ability. They weren't able to rehabilitate. They're not able to go home safely. So what ends up happening is they get moved to the skilled long-term care side of the nursing home, and the average cost in the state of Pennsylvania is around $14,500 a month for care. Around this area, we're probably looking a little close to $13,000 in the York, Lancaster area, but still a significant change for a person who now is not able to rehabilitate. They have to pay privately for this care. And yes, there is a waiver program in the state of Pennsylvania, but in order to go home, it has to be safe to go home. Services have to be in place. And if you've been listening to the show, you know that waiver in Pennsylvania has an income cap limit, so that if a person's income is over the threshold, they're not able to qualify for in-home care under the waiver program. And in a lot of situations, when you start counting Social Security and pensions of individuals, they are over the waiver income cap limit. So a person is essentially forced with having to stay in the skilled facility long term and to the tune of $13,000 a month. So that same person who went to bed that night is essentially hoping for a heart attack. But I am not a doctor, nor do I pretend to be, nor do I play one on TV. But I can tell you that from the little bit of research that I have done, the factors, the things that people look at that make them prone for a stroke, that make them prone for a heart attack, are very similar, if not exactly the same. So the issue is, how do you know what's going to happen? And the answer is you don't, right? So we go through our lives thinking that Medicare is going to take care of us for the rest of our lives. And as long as the facts and circumstances happen a certain way, it will. But if they don't, it won't. And what else is becoming extremely prevalent for whatever reason, more probably than ever? Dementia, Alzheimer's, right? Those are absolutely on the rise. They are definitely more prevalent now than they were 20, 50, 100 years ago. I don't know why. I'm certainly not in the science field, but the truth is they're definitely becoming more prevalent, which means, again, a person very often with a cognitive impairment is not going to be able or will not do it or will refuse to do rehabilitation, which means those are often the people getting kicked off of the rehabilitation on the Medicare side more quickly than anyone else, and now is being responsible for that private skilled facility care long term. All right. So in my workshops, what we have been trying to teach and getting the word out of is, I always feel like when people say the word Medicaid, it's like a 4-letter word, right? And people cringe and they think that the care is only in the county home and it's only bad care, and it's not. That's just not true. It positively is not true. That is not the way that the system was set up, not the way that it was intended. The government never expected us to be able to pay $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 a month for long-term care. The system was set up, and the laws allow us to get Medicaid and to get care in a couple ways, right? So one is to spend down, one is to do a trust or pre-planning ahead of time, which does require you to do it 5 years ahead of time in order to preserve or protect 100% of the assets. Now, let me just get rid of this kind of misconception right out of the gate. In the York and Lancaster area, there are very, very few facilities that do not accept Medicaid. And the reason for that is because the system was built, and long-term care facilities need to accept it in order to be able to make it long-term, because people can't afford to pay privately forever. So they basically have to be able to accept it in order to run their businesses and in order for them to continue to keep their doors open. And how do I know that? Well, because we'll use York as the example. There's essentially one facility in York that does not accept Medicaid. And I haven't talked to them personally, but I'm being told from outside sources that they're in a process to be able to, in the long term, to be able to do it. Why? Because that's the way it was intended. Facilities are going to have a very difficult time making without having the government assisting them, and that's how it's set up. The other thing that I can tell you is our largest referral sources are nursing homes. Nursing homes are the largest referral sources that we have in our practice and that we have had for the past 15 years since I've been on my own, because they also understand the value of getting people qualified so that when the person runs out of money, they don't end up holding the bag and they don't end up eating all of that money. It's better to get money guaranteed, and maybe you're only getting it at an 85% rate versus 100%. But getting 100% for a short period of time and then getting zero for a long period of time doesn't make sense. They can't run the business. And yes, there is a familial responsibility statute in Pennsylvania. Yes, it does say that the children are responsible for the nursing home debt of the parent. Yes, it's there. Yes, it happens. But the truth is, when you hire these firms as a nursing home to be able to sue a child, you're spending 50 grand. These are large litigation firms who specialize, and in order to justify going after somebody, you have to know that you're going to be able to collect on it, right? Because if you sue somebody who has no money, what do you get once you receive the judgment? Nothing. So they're not going to spend all kinds of money suing people and hiring big-time litigation law firms when they could just get people qualified, and then they know that they're going to get a consistent payment for the long term from the government, paid on time. And I'm not going to get into, we don't feel that that's right. I don't make the rules. I just understand them. And my job as a lawyer is to tell you what they are. A gentleman a few years ago, at the beginning of my practice, and especially early on in my career, I didn't necessarily do a lot of this type of planning. And he, kind of said something that has really resonated with me. He said to me, Jeff, every time you tell people that they just have to spend down their assets and there's nothing that can be done, you're committing malpractice. Because the truth is, that something can be done. Whether you like it or don't like it, or whether you think it should be or shouldn't be, it's irrelevant. Our job as lawyers is to help people follow the law the way that the law is written, and that's our job. And if you do anything otherwise, that is committing malpractice, because it does exist. The government sets the rules, not us. Our job is to not determine if it's good, bad, ethical, moral. No. It is the law, and it is allowed. And if the government doesn't like it, they change it. They have the ability to change the rules if they choose to. So in our practice, we have Medicaid Crisis Workshops and we have estate planning workshops. The Medicaid Crisis Workshops are done for people who either themselves or a loved one is going to be in need of skilled level care in the next 6 months to a year. Now, or they're already in it, or they're already going to it immediately. But within a year, if somebody is expecting a loved one to need skilled level care, that's who the Medicaid Crisis Workshops are intended for and who they provide the most benefit for. We do have links of the workshop if you can't come in person, and we also live Zoom them so that you would be able to watch them from the comfort of your home, whether it be a link or whether it be live for one that we're doing in the York or Lancaster office, whatever works for you and your family. That is for people who have not planned ahead, who essentially find themselves in a situation where a loved one needs long-term care, skilled level care in the home or in the nursing home. And now, gosh, what are our options? That is for those people. It would not surprise me, frankly, if the government changed this specific piece in the next 10 years or so. It is for people who have done nothing ahead of time. The government still does allow assets to be protected for a spouse and assets to be protected for family. That's the area where I suspect in the next 10 years, you're probably going to be seeing a change. For the people who are already in need of it in the next year or probably in the next 5 years, they're probably safe. I can't imagine the government's going to change anything that fast, so I don't think we have an issue there. But the bigger part is for the pre-planning side. The rules clearly allow individuals to plan ahead. And again, remember, there's a 5-year look-back period on Medicaid, right? So if you want to do good planning, it has to be done 5 years ahead of time in order to get the best result of 100%. So starting ahead is the key for the pre-planning context. One of the things we talk about in the Medicaid workshop is you've got 2 options to qualify. Spend down your assets, but essentially a person's got to be spent down to under $2,400 or under $8,000. And we always say, just say $2,000. You always want to keep it under $2,400. If a person is on Medicaid at the time of their death and they have more than $2,400 in their name, if they were allowed to have $8,000, now you have a situation where the state requires the family to open an estate, pay the attorney, then get the state paid with the remainder of the money. But again, it can't be more than $8,000 or they wouldn't have been on Medicaid. So let's just say $2,000 for the sake of our conversation, and it is always what we use as our example. That is a very low amount of money. That includes everything, right? That includes cash value in life insurance policies. That includes bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, retirement accounts. That includes everything. So that's a pretty low level. Or the government also says you can use a trust, and if it's funded for 5 years and the assets are in the trust for more than 5 years, you can get 100% asset protection. So that is in a pre-planning context. While I do not have a crystal ball and I cannot predict the future, which nobody can, it is strongly my opinion that that part will not change. Every legislator I've spoken to, every time I've been involved in conversations with policymakers and with politicians, it is essentially always, look, the government has the program set up the way that they want, but if we were to bet, probably the crisis rules, the ones where people do nothing and then all of a sudden at the end they're able to protect assets, that would be the one that they would probably go after if they were ever going to go after any of it. But the pre-planning, the government always wants to encourage people to plan ahead. It is no different than tax planning for the wealthy, right? It's exactly the same thing. And if you listen and read stories, you can see how much people are able to avoid paying in taxes with good, effective tax planning. Medicaid planning is tax planning for the middle class. There really isn't a lot of things that the middle class can do. This is definitely one thing that the government allows and sets the rules. And in order to do it to the biggest extent, to 100% ability, you need to do it 5 years ahead. So that's where the magic happens. Getting the assets in the trust ahead of time to qualify for the programs so that you can get the care that you need, but still be able to provide a legacy on to your loved ones, to your family, not to take advantage of the system, but to use it the way that it was intended and to also still pay a fair share, but not lose everything that you have spent your entire life working on. So the Medicare and Medicaid distinction is Medicare is health insurance, right? And it will provide up to 100 days of rehabilitation in a skilled facility, up to as long as the person is able to rehabilitate and is at least maintaining or progressing in their rehabilitation. And you have to be admitted as well, which there's a whole thing with doctors and hospitals putting people under observation. But yes, there is that part, but the most that that's going to provide is up to 100 days. And honestly, my experience is that most people don't get the 100 days. It's usually around 45 to 55 days. But at least there is something there, but it is not the long-term solution. If you're looking for more information about the crisis stuff, please call the office at 717-845-5390, 717-845-5390, and we will be able to provide you the list and the dates coming up that we are providing the crisis workshops. If anyone you know is in a nursing home or will be in the next year, definitely a workshop that you should check out. And if you're looking to do pre-planning, give us a call in York, Lancaster. We have workshops, 717-845-5390, or check us out on the web at www.belomoassociates.com, and we will be able to give you the information that you need to determine if that planning is right for you and your family. And we now have provided in a way that we're able to do it at a price point that essentially everybody can afford, get the planning that was once intended for people with more money. Because, let's face it, the less money we have, the more important it is to us, because we work so hard to make sure that we can pass on a legacy. We really enjoyed the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I can't thank you enough for listening. It's humbling how many listeners we have, how many text messages and emails I get on the weekends, on Saturdays when people listen to the radio show. We are loving doing this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being loyal. And thanks for all the great feedback that you're giving. We love to see you at the office in Lancaster. And also, we're looking forward to the book coming out this fall. Please stay tuned for the book information once it's officially out on the market, and we will definitely let our listeners know. So thank you for joining us on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. On this podcast, we talked all about Medicare and Medicaid and how to qualify and what the distinctions are. I can't thank you enough for being with us today, and we really do look forward to the next time. Hey, until next time, we'll see you real soon.